A common question that a lot of people ask me is what Bible version they should use. And that's kind of a loaded question because it's more of a personal preference to me. And the question is, why are there so many Bible versions out there, especially for the English versions? Usually when you go to other languages, there's not as many different Bibles for that language. But for the English language, there's over 100 different Bible versions, different translations of the Bible. And the reason is that, one, a lot of these publications, or the publishers, are trying to reach different audiences, to make it easier to understand. Or they go for the scholars, or maybe people who have learning disabilities who have a hard time reading English. And then you have, for the scholars, they try to get closer to the original meaning, which means it's literal. The more literal it is, the harder it is to read, because the original languages are not the same as how we do English, the grammar. And another reason is money. Instead of just having one New King James Bible, there are hundreds of different kinds of New King James Version Bibles out there. Each one has its own uniqueness to it. And when it comes to the versions, each version has its own positive and negatives, which is, when you have something that's more literal, the positive is you're closer to the language, and so you're getting more of the Greek or the Hebrew, Aramaic language than something that is a paraphrase, where it kind of goes away from the original language. But it does that for understanding purposes, for people who cannot understand a literal translation. But when you do a paraphrase or thought for thought type translation, sometimes it becomes ambiguous in that it can change the meaning of what's trying to be said from the original language. So you have to compensate, which one you want. Do you want something that's easy to read and understand? Or do you want something that's more literal, more scholarly? Word for word is the closest to the original language. Thought for thought is an easier translation for those who have a hard time with a word for word translation. A paraphrase can be for those for children. It's easier to understand what's being said. But as I said, it's a paraphrase. It gets away from the original text. Try to stay with what's being said in the original text, but it's not word for word. And so one thing I suggest doing for people who want a looser translation for understanding purposes get a version that you can understand, but then also get a word for word version to compare. I have about 50 translations of the Bible. I use them for research, for comparison of what's being said. A lot of people nitpick about words being used from one translation to the other. A lot of times, they use a synonym. The English language can use various words that mean the same thing. The ones that I use is the New King James Version along with the NIV. I've used those versions for 30 years or more. Some people love the King James Version. That's great. Use that version if you like it. Some people do have a hard time reading and understanding the King James Version because we do not use that older English type of language. And that's why we have the modern translations, because they're closer to how we speak nowadays. So here's a list of the word for word type translations, thought for thought, and a paraphrase. It says find a version you like according to your reading ability. Go to Bible Hub. I use it to compare verses all the time. I'm still an old-fashioned type of person who likes to have a Bible, a book out, and read it every day. But I use Bible Hub when I want to do quick research, or if I'm looking for commentary or the original language. It's a useful tool because you can get the Greek, the Hebrew, and you also have many of the old the different text. So if you don't have a Bible translation, or you're looking for one that is better than the one that you have, or easier to read or whatever, go to Bible Hub. Look at the different versions. Read them. And if it turns out to be thought for thought or paraphrase type, also get a word for word and compare the two. And like I said, they have the original languages. You can go in there under a verse and go to the Hebrew or the Greek, and you can look at the way the words are translated from the original language to the English language. One thing I'm big on that I tell people: do not get versions done by one person. Versions that are done by one person usually have a lot of their own doctrine, their own thoughts about how something should be. And that's not the way a Bible should be translated. It should be translated according to the original word, what God wanted us to know, not what a person thinks it should be. It's a personal opinion, and I see checks and balances. Checks and balances are the committees of translators. And a lot of times it keeps a person from putting their own opinion in a Bible. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it keeps one person from putting their opinion throughout the whole text, as a single translator would do. The Passion Translation is, I think, one of the ones I could say that has a lot of personal opinion in it. instead of going according to the original Greek or the original Hebrew or the original languages. So check out the different versions available. Find one that's easy for you to read, but then check out another Bible and compare the two. That way it gives you a nice rounded understanding of what God is trying to say to you. So keep reading your Bible and have a blessed day.